Bonjour tout le monde, I'm Diane. I've been living here in France, in the Loire Valley specifically, since 2012. And a few months ago here on my channel, I made a video all about things that France does better than the United States. And today, in the name of balance, I want to do the reverse video, things that the US does better than France. And yes, for all of you skeptics out there, yes, there are some things I feel that the US does better than France. So with that, let's get into it. All right, number one, a can-do attitude and just an ease of getting things done. If you've lived in France for any length of time and maybe you've had to deal with the bureaucracy, you've definitely heard the phrase, "Oh, madame, ce n'est pas possible," which basically means, "I'm sorry, ma'am, that's not possible." And it's almost comical sometimes because you come to expect it. You know, if you don't have the correct number of copies for your dossier, or you ask someone an easy question that slightly deviates just a little from normal procedure, the automatic response from French people is often, it's not possible. It's just not possible to do whatever it is you're trying to do. And the truth is, sometimes, yes, it is possible, but you have to insist a little bit more and play the game. Now, in the United States, simple tasks just seem easier to get done. There's less rigidity, there's a better line system, and the attitude is just different. It's geared at solving the problem and not putting up roadblocks to get in the way. And I feel like that absolutely speaks to the customer service attitude overall in the US, which we'll get to in a minute. But just know in France, it's totally normal to hear, "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am, that's not possible. That can't be done." So you just have to push a little harder. All right, number two, the ability to change one's career or job. In the United States, if you want to explore a different career, you can do so without a ton of difficulty. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's quite common for people to change careers in the US or change workplaces. My dad, for example, he was in a corporate environment in IT for all of his career, and then well into adulthood, he became a ferry boat captain on the New York waterway. I'll have to tell you that story sometime. I'm really proud of him. But I know people who have gone from nursing to back to school for law. They've made huge career jumps. Like, the point is, you can make moves. So even if you work in one industry and you have a certain skill set and you want to branch out into a different industry, you could definitely apply to a job, explain how your skill set translates over, maybe have an interview and have a shot at a job. But in France, career paths tend to be a bit more rigid. And I feel like you see fewer people changing careers, especially well into adulthood. It definitely exists. I don't want to, lead anyone astray here or give you complete nonsense, but you can do what's called une reconversion professionnelle, a professional reconversion, a career change. So yes, you can do a career change in France. It's just not as common. I don't think it's as normal. So if you work in one industry, you pretty much stay in that industry. And I feel that employers in France, they're much more strict about hiring. And if your resume doesn't have that exact experience and training that they want, you most likely won't even get an interview. You don't really sell yourself in a cover letter and then prove you have similar skills that translate. If you don't have the exact work experience in a lot of cases, you're out of luck. And I remember talking to Tom, my French husband. If you're new to my channel, just for your information, he has a master's degree. He speaks 3 languages. And I remember talking to him years ago just about his career and, telling him about friends of mine who have changed careers, and he was kind of stagnant in his. And I encouraged him to apply to some private companies in the area that weren't in his exact field of expertise, but where his skills could definitely translate. They could cross over. I mean, he's good at what he does. And he told me, nah, I'm not going to waste time with that. I would never get an interview because his experience, while relevant and valuable in my mind, it wouldn't really be of interest to them, to these companies, because he'd never worked in that exact role before. That kind of seems crazy to me because if you see a capable person, you see someone who could do the job, they can learn something, even if they haven't done the exact job. It's kind of a shame that I feel like people don't get a chance as much in France. I don't know if that's your impression as well, but in the US as well, in addition to totally changing one's career, even within the same industry, a lot of people change jobs. I see this a lot in tech. Every 3 to 5 years to climb the career ladder, with better pay and benefits. It's kind of a strategy. You could change jobs, change companies, move up. But I feel like in France, that is less common. Now, here, employees tend to be happier. They work less than Americans. They have work contracts. It's not at-will employment. Healthcare is not tied to their employment at all. And all full-time employees get 5 weeks of paid vacation by law that they are expected to use. And that is separate from their bank of sick days and holidays. All right, moving on. Number 3, friendly optimism. Many Americans are half glass full kind of people, where I'd say in France, people's attitudes can be a little bit more toward the half glass empty side. And, the French, they're known to be big complainers. They even say this about themselves. And look, I'm American. I am not an over-the-top, smiley Pollyanna. For the record, I hate toxic positivity. Anyone who's over the top, it's like too much energy for me. But American optimism is something that definitely doesn't exist in France, that same sort of vibe. And yeah, Americans can be over the top and fake, but a lot of times it's just a vibe. It's a positive attitude, and I like that. In France, I'd say people are more cautious. They're more critical. The French language, I've mentioned this before, even has a negative slant at times. So like, for example, let me just give you one. When you want to say something is pretty good, you could say it's pas mal, like not bad, which means you like it. So, is that guy good looking? Well, he's not ugly. He's pas mal. He's not bad. It's just a different vibe and a different default setting. All right, number 4, big parking spaces. Now, if you drive in France, you've probably noticed that French parking spaces are a bit narrower than the ones you find in the US. And depending on how people are parked next to you, how much space you have to turn, you may have to do a quick maneuver. The French are masters at these quick maneuvers, by the way. Instead of just turning like right into the space in one fell swoop, you got to back up, move forward, back up, move forward, maybe even go park in reverse with your tail going into the space first. In the US, parking spaces are bigger. I appreciate that. If you have a bigger car, someone's probably going to say, well, Diane, of course spaces are bigger. Americans have bigger cars. Yes, that's true, but not all French people have small cars either. And even with a small car, it could be a really tight squeeze to park. So I appreciate the roomier parking spaces in the US. It's just easier to park. You don't have to do as many maneuvers, even with a small car. By the way, I did a video about things that are smaller in France than in the US, and you could check that out, linked here. All right, number 5, customer service. People love to rag on America and Americans, but one thing we get right is customer service. Now, most of the time, the customer has the upper hand, and companies, they try to do the right thing, sometimes even like bending over backwards, and surprising you in the process to the point of it being like really good, but excessive. And I don't think anyone needs anything over the top, but just a quality customer service level. That would be like a good default, I think, everywhere in the world. But in France, customer service is a little different. You often feel like you're in the wrong, even if it's the company that messed up. It can be really frustrating to get minor issues resolved. And French companies seem to have a different definition of service than American companies. So to me, France is not winning in the customer service department. But that said, I have had a lot of really great experiences with customer service in France, especially in recent years. But just know that companies often don't bend over backwards to make something right. I've been told the problem's my fault. I caused it. And even if the issue is their fault, like your internet being down for the whole day because they cut a wire when they were doing work, beyond like a sorry, you really can't expect much more. If you have a problem, maybe they'll credit you like a €5 refund on a €200 bill. And that's after you've called 3 times and been transferred from person to person around the globe like 5 times. So just something to keep in mind. You have to adjust your expectations. And I feel like sometimes French companies, they're not gracious to have customers. Like one time Tom called our internet provider at 7:55 p.m. They closed at 8. And the woman answered and told him to call back tomorrow because she was off shift at 8 and didn't have time to deal with the call. And she had already shut down her computer. So yeah, a little bit different. And mind you, that was after being on hold to waiting to speak to someone for 20 minutes. And at that time back in the day, you had to pay to make customer service calls. Like it wasn't a toll-free number. And also like for makeup and skincare products in France, if you've opened the product, forget about returning it unless it's defective. Like Sephora, they're one that comes to mind here. Just to contrast, back in the US, if you buy a makeup product from a place like Sephora, you try it, you get like a huge allergic reaction. You can return it to the store. You'll get refunded. You aren't going to be asked questions. It's part of their return policy. But in France, Sephora's a little different. You can return your products, but they need to be unopened in their original packaging. So forget about having an allergic reaction or not liking something. You're stuck with it for the most part. And just thinking back to my best customer service experience ever, it was in the US with a company called Chewy.com. They're a pet supply company. This is not sponsored, but I've been a customer for years. And after Dagny, my sweet dog, passed away, I let them know I no longer wanted to receive their emails. I had to cancel like an auto renewal thing. And to my surprise, they sent me a gorgeous bouquet of flowers and a beautiful card that honestly made me cry. It was so touching, so thoughtful, completely unexpected. And if I ever need pet supplies, they will always be my go-to store. And their strategy was genius. Like, I felt it was heartfelt. It was also a strategy, but I felt valued and cared for. And look, now I'm telling you, but Chewy.com, they care about their customers and they will always get my business. And as I always say, I'm not here to judge, and I'll never say one country is inherently better across the board for everyone. That doesn't exist. There are pros and cons to life in France, the US, anywhere on earth, there are pros and cons. And also, I think it's important to keep in mind that not everyone's experience in France or in the US is going to be exactly the same. There are just too many factors that go into that, like someone's socioeconomic status, where they're living, their age, their life experiences, their mindset, like their family situation. There are just so many things that impact our lives on a personal level that we can't generalize to how someone's going to feel living in a certain place. And also something I want to be clear about, just because there are a lot of great aspects of life in one place, it doesn't mean by default that life everywhere else is terrible. I've never taken that stance on this channel. I never will. I enjoy life in France. I'm here. I've lived here for over a decade. And I enjoy when I go back to the US. I think we need to kind of seek out positives and enjoy what we like and make peace with the rest. So that's just my thoughts on things. Yeah, just a word below. If you leave a comment, I want to remind you, please be respectful. My comment section is not a place to bash any country or its people. So if you feel compelled to make a comment like that, just don't. And for anyone planning to visit France, I often tell you about my e-guide. So if you've never heard of it, it has all kinds of practical tips for visiting France, like transportation, culture, money, all kinds of tips like that. And it is called 75 Beginner France Tips for a Standout Trip. And it's a way to support my channel and make sure my content here stays free. I have no intentions of ever doing a membership site or a Patreon. I want you to be able to watch my videos for free. So if you like what I do here, that's a way to say thanks. I will link my guide down below. And with that, thank you as always for being here. Merci beaucoup. And see you back here on We in France soon. Salut!